speaking of absolute bonkers behavior from the Republican Party and also name dropping Donald Trump and Mar-a-Lago, I want to turn to, this is outside the halls of Congress because it concerns two actors who are not involved with the legislature. It concerns Donald Trump and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley. So he's outgoing in the sense that he is leaving his position. He's retiring after 44 years, and he has been the target of some pretty nasty comments from Donald Trump, pretty deranged comments from Donald Trump. I want to play a clip here of a recent 60 Minutes interview where he is asked about recent threats made against his person by Republicans, by Donald Trump, who called for his execution. And I just think this exchange is extremely important. I want you to see what Mark Milley says, and I want you to see the look on his face, and we'll unpack it together.
President Trump recently said that your dealings with China were so egregious that in times gone by, the punishment would have been death.
That's right, he said that. That's correct.
He is suggesting that you be punished by death. The former commander-in-chief to his former top military advisor.
Look, I'm a soldier. I've been faithful and loyal to the Constitution of the United States for 44 and a half years. And my family and I have sacrificed greatly for this country, my mother and father before them. And, you know, as much as these comments are directed at me, it's also directed at the institution of the military. And there's 2.1 million of us in uniform. And the American people can take it to the bank that all of us, every single one of us, from private to general, we're loyal to that Constitution and we'll never turn our back on it no matter what the threats, no matter what the humiliation, no matter what. If we're willing to die for that document, if we're willing to deploy to combat, if we're willing to lose an arm, a leg, an eye, to protect and support and defend that document and protect the American people, then we're willing to live for it too. So I'm not going to comment directly on those things, but I can tell you that this military, this soldier, me, will never turn our back on that Constitution.
But for the record, was there anything inappropriate or treasonous about the calls you made to China?
Absolutely not. Zero. None.
It almost seems odd to ask this question because the former commander-in-chief seems to be calling for your execution. Are you worried about your safety?
I've got adequate safety precautions. I wish those comments had not been made, but they were, and we'll take appropriate measures to ensure my safety and the safety of my family.
Wow.
Few things make me as mad as stories like this for a few reasons. Many of them just based on what was touched on there, the threats to his life, someone who served his country for this long. And also, it's more than just hypocrisy doesn't even begin to explain it. The disgusting dishonesty of people who proclaim to be pro-military when it comes to all these political debates so that they can call you're not patriotic, you hate America because I'm the real arbiter of who is a patriot and I love the military. And then turn around and say nothing as a lifelong military leader. How many years do you say?
44.
44 years serving the country. And your cult leader is saying in times gone by, he would have been executed for what he did. And Republicans are silent. You can't ever proclaim to be patriotic and for the military and you love the troops when you allow for that to be your party. That is your party, Republicans. It is blindingly stunning.
Yeah, so for me, it's a couple of things. So again, it's worth pointing out. I know a lot of people say, listen, because the Republican Party's currency is hypocrisy, to point it out is an exercise in futility. But I do believe that generally most people have an innate disgust for hypocrisy. So I do think pointing this stuff out will, if you find the right combination of words at the right time, somebody will be persuaded to be like, you know what, yeah, that was beyond the pale. And maybe that will motivate somebody to turn away from the MAGA cult. But even if not, it's still just worth pointing out as an interesting fact of history that 10 years ago, this would have been eminently disqualifying. If a Republican politician, let alone a former president who's attempting to be president again, ever threatened or even insinuated a threat against a military officer or a soldier, let alone the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they would have been exiled from the party. They would have been condemned wholesale. But Donald Trump has radically transformed the norms of the Republican Party. To your point, Luke, as far as I'm aware, the Republican politicians have done one of two things with respect to this comment. Number one, endorse it, like Paul Gosar has done in his, very creepy newsletter, a Republican congressman, or they've stayed silent, one of the two. I have not heard any vociferous condemnation from a sitting Republican politician. I wouldn't be surprised if Mitt Romney has, but I'm just not aware of the sort of backlash. And it's a different sphere of things, but I'm thinking of how Democrats are reacting to the conduct of Bob Menendez, the Democratic senator of New Jersey. Again, you're talking about threats versus corrupt behavior. I understand it's different things, but
consistency.
Right. 100%. Half of the Democratic caucus in the Senate have stood up and said Bob Menendez needs to resign. And this is just based on indictments, credible indictments, but indictments. We have Donald Trump's words right here on the page.
And because you said that, let me read. We should have done this earlier. The part that's being referenced. He said on True Social, this guy turned out to be a woke train wreck, talking about Mark Milley, who, if the fake news reporting is correct, was actually dealing with China to give them a heads up on the thinking of the President of the United States. This is an act so egregious that in times gone by, the punishment would have been death. And he's talking about, and Mark Esper followed up in an interview and explained what is being referenced there. Military leaders were notifying or communicating, as they're constantly doing, with their counterparts in other countries such as China, while Trump was going ballistic and everyone was terrified about, is he going to attack us? We're hearing reporting about him possibly wanting to start a conflict to keep himself the president because he's trying to overthrow the election right now. And so then the leading military leaders were saying, listen, just stay calm. We're going to do everything to keep things stable here. They weren't giving information about the headspace of the president. They were just trying to keep things stable so we don't have a nuclear war, which is exactly what we'd want from them. And that's not why Trump's mad at him. He's mad at him because he's called Trump out, Mark Milley that is, for who Trump is and the threat he poses to democracy and the rule of law. And because of that, he's fine saying to his followers who have done some violent things because of his words and lies, this guy deserves death.
Yeah, so I want to add to that. It's interesting. So if I remember correctly, that particular story broke in terms of Chairman Milley, General Milley's reaching out to China in a book by Bob Woodward, who broke the Watergate scandal, called Peril, and it was about the last few months in the first few months of the Biden presidency and the last few months of the Trump presidency. And the situation was this: China had heard whispers or rumors that Donald Trump had apparently been considering firing nukes. So it was actually China was under the impression that then defeated Donald Trump might do something irrational and nuclear. So it wasn't like General Milley was proactively reaching out and doing anything. We found out that China was under the impression that something might happen. And so to head off nuclear war, and also in a weird way to kind of throw Trump a bone.
Yeah.
We don't know that Trump was actually going to try to, nuclearly strike another country. So he was actually acting on Trump's behalf. Like, no, he really doesn't want to nuke anybody. So please don't freak out. He was trying to de-escalate. It would be bad enough if we or General Milley knew for certain Trump had nefarious schemes because as the president, he's the sole nuclear authority. But it's actually more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
Trump was acting erratic, but there was no plans to attack or nuclearly strike anybody. And so Milley was doing two things. He was looking out for national security, which is part of his obligation as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And he was actually trying to de-escalate our most powerful foreign adversary on behalf of Donald Trump. But it doesn't matter because Trump's warped brain sees this as, oh, he undermined me. He went behind my back. He indicated that I'm not stable. He did not support me. He did not reinforce me, even though, again, I think that actually the straightforward interpretation of the facts is that's exactly what he did.
And I think it's so bizarre. Way more the timing too, because that reporting has been around for a long time. Yeah. This has to do with the reason he sent this out recently, September 22nd, is because we got new reporting that Mark Milley was warning behind the scenes, currently talking to friends and stuff, saying if Trump gets back into power, no joke, this guy's locking up his political opponents and I'm at the top of the list. That's the stuff that Trump's actually upset with. But he doesn't want to reference that because that makes him look horrible. Now, apparently, no one who supports him cares anymore that a top military leader, lifelong military leader, who served under Donald Trump, and like you said, was trying to help him the best that he could, is saying this guy is a threat to the rule of law. And a bunch of people hear that who have spent their entire career or lives following politics, saying they care about and respect the military and its leaders and those who serve within it, and go, woke lib.
Right. Well, the other thing too is a lot of that, the woke angle, came from testimony that General Milley gave to, and a viral moment, a viral exchange between he and Matt Gaetz. This was also about a year ago. The thing about Mark Milley is, and if you read any like op-ed or any expose on him, and I've read a few, he is exceptionally well educated. He's what, people in fiction or people who study like medieval history and things like that would refer to as a warrior poet, because it's not just about combat and training. He's exceptionally well educated on various political philosophies. He thinks it's extremely important, and it makes the military even more effective, right? And so that sort of cerebral approach, if you read Peril or if you read these exposés, Donald Trump over time found it really unflattering, because reportedly the thing that sold him on Mark Milley was Mark Milley's appearance. I mean, he looks the part. I think you and I discussed this too. Like
central casting.
He would be like in A Few Good Men if Jack Nicholson hadn't been available, But Trump didn't want a cerebral, thoughtful person who was loyal to the Constitution. And I feel like that's the other thing that bears repeating. It is true that the sitting president is commander-in-chief. That is true. But the military, we're not in the United Kingdom. In the United Kingdom, the British armed forces swear fealty to the monarch, to Queen Elizabeth II or to King George III. That's not the case in the United States. The military isn't supposed to be loyal to the president, Biden or Trump. They're supposed to be loyal to the Constitution. And yes, operationally, that means they take their day-to-day orders from the president. But it's also supposed to be lawful orders. Like if Donald Trump issues as a president an unlawful order, the military is not obligated to obey it. They have a constitutional duty to disregard it. It's an extremely complex thing. But Trump tries to dumb it down, Luke, as I'm president, you are not, and anything I say, any utterance I give is like a divine edict that you're obligated to unquestionably obey.
And it's that dictatorial. So disgusting. That's why he's so enamored by Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, because that's what they get to do. That is how they're responded to. And he wishes that he could have that. And I need to remind people, if Trump wins again, there's not going to be Mark Milley. There's not going to be any of these individuals who had a line and when it crossed that line for Trump. And Trump's going to make sure that he only has the hardcore loyalists. And so all the things that we say about him that didn't end up happening because someone didn't go along with it, like Mike Pence not rejecting the certification of the election, or Mark Milley not doing any number of things that Trump wished he could do.
Sure.
Someone else is going to be in that spot. It might be VP Marjorie Greene next time.
Or Chairman Michael Flynn. Imagine Michael Flynn as the chair.
Full QAnon guy, right.
Yeah, goosebumps just thinking about that.
And so when we talk about, because this is one of the responses I get from people just who aren't super tuned into politics or who are sort of center right. It's a little hyperbolic when you say that Trump, this is what they're saying to me, is a threat to democracy and wants to overthrow the rule of law and wishes he could be a dictator. And it's because those things didn't happen yet. And for a lot of people, it's so much easier to default to normal. And in normal times, it would be hyperbolic to say any politician wants to be a dictator. Excuse me. Or try to overthrow our democratic process and install themselves the president like a dictator would do. And I get that. It's hard to get your head around that. But when you go through the details of what Trump was trying to do, when you look at extensive reporting behind the scenes, not to mention what's in the indictments, the different schemes, it was what would have been an overthrowing of our lawful process like we haven't seen before. And so just because it didn't work, don't let that make you believe that it's not as much of a threat, because it could next time.
100%. The thing is, we take so many things for granted. And again, if people are students of history, believe it or not, there were political scientists and social experts at the time saying the same thing, not to invoke Godwin, about post-World War I Germany. You know, this guy with the mustache, he's not going to be a big deal. And then he turned out to be the most dangerous fascist in the history of the planet. We take certain things for granted because we assume a thing that has not happened before, or a thing that was attempted before and was stopped in the nick of time. We take certain things for granted. There's nothing, the United States is not perfect and it's not foolproof. Like every government system, it relies on reciprocal good faith. These are not Harry Potter contracts. This is not a contract in Supernatural where it's magically compelled. The guardrails, the institutions that, you know, certain conservative commentators like Ben Shapiro will say, you know, the guardrails gang, they held. Well, they only held because we had a sufficient number of people in good faith to reinforce them. But as you say, Luke, Trump is aware of that. As stupid and corrupt as he is, he's aware of that. He's like, okay, Mike Pence turned me down here. Bill Barr turned me down here. Rod Rosenstein turned me down here. Mark Milley checked me here. So I'll just replace them with yes men. And then when you don't have people in those crucial positions acting in good faith, then we are at a legitimate risk of succumbing to an authoritarian, because then the question becomes, well, who's going to stand up to him? Will it be Kevin McCarthy? Will Kevin McCarthy finally find his backbone? Will Mitch McConnell, if he's still here in the Senate, will he do it? We have no reason to believe that the Republican Party will meet the moment, because you could arguably make the case they didn't in 2021.
Oh gosh, they didn't. Yeah, absolutely. And just one more time, really think about it. If you're conservative and you're still holding on to some support for Trump for some reason, do you really think it's more likely that all these people who have left working with Trump and said this guy's dangerous, including a lifelong military leader, you can't be serious. Don't play with me like that. You can't honestly look at him and his career and go, yeah, no, he's just another woke liberal. He just has Trump derangement syndrome. Really think about all the people you've heard Trump call rhino because they worked with him and went, oh my gosh, this guy's terrifying. Don't let him be president. Do you really think it's more likely that all of them are lying because Trump's just so fantastic for some reason? Or maybe Trump, who has all the interest in the world. Mark Milley doesn't have to be getting threatened right now and his life at risk for what he's saying. He could have just been silent. He chooses to speak out and put his life at risk and doesn't have an interest in doing so. That doesn't benefit his life. It benefits Trump's life a whole lot to lie. It's probably more likely that he's the one who's being dishonest. Thank you so much for watching. For the outro on this video, I want to plug Josiah's channel. Hit them with it, Josiah.
Hey, everybody. I appreciate you watching. You can find me at youtube.com/@ponderingpolitics. One word, pondering politics. If you like progressive commentary that focuses on coalition building with other elements of the left and calling the Republican Party out for what it's become, I hope you'll view my channel. Give me a like and subscribe and some feedback. Again, youtube.com/@ponderingpolitics. Thanks again.